Welcome to U.S. Military News Channel. Dear friends, China, Russia say united against South Korea missile defense. Beijing, China has a range of economic, diplomatic and military options to retaliate if the U.S. and South Korea proceed with deployment of an advanced missile defense system, experts said Friday, as Beijing remained vague in its threats against the plan. Such steps could raise the stakes for Washington and Seoul in a controversial deployment that China regards as a major security threat, while complicating matters for South Korea as it faces domestic political divisions and significant public opposition. China's official Xinhua News Agency said Beijing and Moscow agreed to take further countermeasures in response to the plan during security talks between the two countries in Moscow on Thursday. The countermeasures will be aimed at safeguarding interests of China and Russia and the strategic balance in the region, Xinhua quoted the agreement as saying. The report gave no details, and a Chinese foreign ministry spokesman on Friday said only that China has a legitimate right to defend its security interests. China believes it is a serious threat to China's security interests and for the region, Lu Kang said at a daily briefing. I believe that as long as our country has legitimate security concerns, it is understandable that necessary measures be taken to safeguard such interests. The proposed Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, radar system aims to guard against North Korean missiles, a threat that drew renewed attention after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un announced in his annual New Year's address that the country had reached the final stages of developing an intercontinental ballistic missile. China has campaigned relentlessly against the deployment, warning of unspecified retaliation and leading to a sharp downturn in relations with Seoul. China says the system's powerful radar can peer deep into its territory, allowing the U.S. to monitor flights and missile launches and potentially making it capable of launching a preemptive strike. China's efforts could now be bearing fruit, with a possible South Korean presidential contender saying last month that THAAD's security benefits would be outweighed by worsened relations with China and Russia. Liberal opposition politician Moon Jae-in downplayed concerns that backtracking by South Korea on the plans would cause tension with the United States, which he said was the most important country for South Korea in face of nuclear-armed rival North Korea. So far, Beijing has only hinted at economic retaliation against South Korea, with scattered reports of cancelled visits by South Korean film stars and singers and shipments of South Korean cosmetics being held up at customs. The state newspaper Global Times proposed last year that China blackball companies taking part in the THAAD deployment and ban politicians who support it from visiting. China might also exert pressure by cancelling planned or potential business deals and cultural or educational exchanges, said Denny Roy, a senior fellow at the East-West Center in Honolulu, Hawaii. It could also send Chinese Coast Guard ships to escort fishing boats into waters claimed by South Korea, dispatch military aircraft and ships into South Korean air and sea space, and suggest that it might do less to restrain North Korea from provocative behavior, Roy said. China still has a large number of strings it could pull to punish South Korea, he said. Militarily, Russia and China could deploy more missiles, especially those with maneuverable warheads, to overwhelm THAAD, along with the use of decoys and attempts to jam the system, analysts say. In addition to withholding help on North Korea, Russia could also harden its position in Syria, where it is allied with Bashar Assad's government against anti-regime forces friendly to the United States. Under Trump, Army eyes more troops, newer equipment. The U.S. Army's Chief of Staff said Thursday he is prepared to brief the incoming Trump administration on plans to increase modernization and add more soldiers to the ranks. We do want to be bigger, General Mark Milley told an audience at an Association of the United States Army breakfast. We, the Army, think our capacity needs to increase. We think our capability, the technical capability of our systems and formations, needs to increase, and we think our readiness needs to increase. The Army, like the rest of the U.S. military, is poised to reverse a persistent trend of deep cuts to end strength and modernization under the Obama administration with the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump next week. We fully understand that it's an expensive proposition, Milley said. We know specifically what we need to do, and we are prepared to discuss that when asked by the new administration. The Army's top priority continues to be readiness, he said. In many of the ways we measure readiness, we have made some significant improvements, Milley said. Our equipment statuses are better than they were, our training is better now, we have got units rotating through decisive action rotations at their combat training centers and a lot of home station training. We are not there yet, we are not at the level of readiness that we need to be at to fully execute the national strategic plans to the level that I would be comfortable with, he said. Manning levels. The top challenge to maintaining readiness, Milley said, is that many units do not have the number of available soldiers they are required to have. Manning has been the biggest problem area, dragging readiness back, he said. We are still significantly challenged on the manning front with a significant amount of non-availables, so we have got to work hard at that. Currently, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal 2017 has directed the Army to make sure its active force end strength is at 476,000 by October 1, Milley said. This is a shift from the Obama administration's original request for the same period, which had the active force decreasing to 460,000. If we do get additional people, the very first thing we need to do is improve the manning levels in the existing organizations because our formations are under strength, he said. We set a target of 95%, depending on the unit, but when you take out your 10% of unavailables, you take your day-to-day activities that strip people out of training. You find units going to training sometimes down around 80% or, in some cases, even lower. But Milley warned that the Army will need additional funding if it is required to grow its end strength. So if by example we did have additional people, it's important to get the money with the people, because when you just get additional people or additional end strength but we don't have the money, that leads you down the road of a hollow force, he said. Modernization. Milley also said that increasing modernization is going to be a major effort this year. The other piece of it is modernization, of course, which is nothing more than future readiness, and we have got to pick the pace up there, he said. We intend to do that this year and next, to try to recoup some of the lost years of modernization accounts we have had over the past 15 years. Milley said he had made a list of modernization priorities, but he would not be specific nor would he rank them in any order of importance. Ground mobility is a big deal, he said. We have introduced some programs, and we are working on that especially with our light force. We want to give them ground mobility capabilities there. Protecting the Army's helicopter fleet is also a priority, Milley said. Aviation is very vulnerable against a near-peer, high-end threat, he said. It's one thing to fight guerrillas and terrorists where you have almost exclusive freedom of the air, but it's another thing to fight some near-peer, higher-end threat. So protection of our aviation is a big deal, and we have a variety of creative initiatives going on to protect rotary wing aviation, extend their range with engine improvements etc. The Army also wants increased lethality, Milley said. In the long term, the service is looking at non-traditional kinetics, such as railguns and lasers. In the short term, the Army wants more munitions that give us extended range for a variety of our firearms platforms, specifically artillery, both rocket and tube artillery, he said. Electronic warfare. Ensuring that the Army's command and control systems can withstand enemy electronic warfare and cyber attacks is another important modernization priority, Milley said. It's highly unlikely that the Army will have the freedom of action in the electromagnetic spectrum it has enjoyed for the last 15 years of war, he said. The probability of that happening against a near peer is zero. You are just not going to have that kind of freedom of action, Milley said. The Army is working on ways to harden its radio, GPS and mission command systems so units can continue to operate in areas where the electromagnetic spectrum is under attack, he said. You have heard me many times talk about the various challenges around the world, and if you are paying close attention to the Senate confirmation hearings, you will see those challenges repeatedly asked in questions to the nominees, Milley said. They are serious challenges, they are challenges that our nation, regardless of who is in the White House, is going to have to come to grips with. And our part of that, as an army, is to be ready.